On today's show, we will look at another segment of Climbing the Corporate Ladder and the revitalization of downtown Altoona. Joy in the City is a program highlighting people and organizations having an impact in our city. All too often, we hear about the problems and dysfunction in our culture, but we are coming with a different approach as we take a look at the good things going on right here in our community. I'm Lindsay Irvin, and you're about to see what God is doing in our city. In this segment of Climbing the Corporate Ladder, we will hear from husband and wife Dave and Bobbie Miller, who both have successful but independent businesses.
Well, let me just say thank you for joining me today. This is part of a relatively new segment for Joy in the City that we are doing about people that have climbed the corporate ladder in a sense with integrity. Most people, couples that do a business, they do it in the same business, but you two have done something somewhat unique where you have generated successful business but that are pretty independent. So before we get into that, talk to me about the early days of starting two different businesses and what the dream, the desire of that, how that all came about.
We actually moved back to the area because of our families, and we wanted our kids to know their grandparents. So we did something that's totally, I tell people not to do now. We moved back lock, stock, and barrel, no jobs, 2.6 children, and just decided that we were going to establish in Altoona. Now, you mentioned that we are in two separate businesses, and I always tell people that we are happily married, and we would not be if we were in the same business because we both have type A personalities.
Sure.
So we got divergent businesses
Yes.
and have made it work.
And I can understand that because I've always said if my wife and I ever went into business, we would kill each other
Exactly.
together. So what was the process of, as believers, men and women of God, in starting a business in the corporate world? What was the process that you went through to do that, and how challenging has that been to maintain a level of integrity and honor in the midst of a culture that usually isn't?
Well, keep in mind a couple of things. When we moved back here in the same year, we had our third child, and we both started our businesses. I came out of a corporate situation, and Bobbie had worked various different jobs, but nothing in terms of a career situation. We spent some time looking around as to what we'd like to do, because I came out of the restaurant business. We kind of migrated looking at that. But we ended up, after viewing several different things, our financial advisor said, "You seem to know what you're doing. Why don't you do that?" So I did. And Bobbie, being very good with people, that's how she ended up purchasing an HR company, or what was at the time called a permanent placement. So I wouldn't recommend to anybody they do all that in the same year, which we did, and it naturally caused its own problems. Starting two businesses almost from scratch.
No money.
No money, and living with Bobbie's parents. But I think one of the things that you also have to keep in mind is you get stronger in your faith as you become more, you become older, you become wiser. I wouldn't say that our faith then is as strong as it is now, but we had the basics of the faith, which said, look, you do things with integrity, you do things with honesty, you do things keeping other people in mind, in many cases before you, and you certainly learned the lesson of living with a lot less than you would like to have had. And then, as time goes along and you get wiser, you get stronger in the faith, I wouldn't necessarily say it becomes easier, because there are different things that you learn from owning a faith-based business and running it as a faith-based business. One of the ones that always struck us in the beginning is, because we were faith-based, people wanted us to charge them less. Well, you're a Christian, you want to take care of us, and that can create some problems.
Sure.
Because you got to pay your bills too.
One of the things that's unique in this situation, a lot of times if someone is an entrepreneur, they put piles of hours in starting their business and so forth. And sometimes if the husband does that, the wife takes care of the home, or vice versa. If the wife wants to be that, sometimes the husband can take care. So you guys both starting this together, how did you make, because your kids are wonderful. I know them as adults,
Exactly.
they're wonderful. And how did you make a stable home environment while you're developing and building businesses from scratch for the most part?
Mm-hmm.
We had a wonderful support system. Our kids grew up not only with our direction, but David's parents and my parents, and we had aunts and uncles, and very strong support system.
And you had to kind of decide out how people were going to do things, and there we have Bobbie, where we're moving back here. She decides to go back to. She decides to start college. Okay, she's running a business. She's taking care of the house and the kids. Not that I didn't help, but there was a lot more of it on her than there was on me. She was the nice one. I was the mean one, the good cop,
Not really.
bad cop. You look back on some things, and they're life lessons to people. But one of the things that we did was when the kids were old enough, each one was responsible for doing a dinner one night a week. So, they had to learn to think ahead, they had to learn to prepare, they had to learn, in some cases, how to cook. Derek's a very good cook, Jamie's a very good cook, Jason...
Makes hot dogs.
Yeah, Jason's meals were one week we had hot dogs and beans. Well, the next week we had beans and hot dogs. And then one time he called and said, "Hey, how about bringing home some Texas hot dogs?" So we bring it home and said, "Well, the bill is so and so," and he's going like, "Oh,
I already have the
those?"
paper out. He never asked us to do that again.
And it was a good life lesson. It's things
Sure.
that probably I don't know. I've never heard anybody else that has done anything like that. When I mean by the mean part, I establish certain rules like, okay, if you want to buy a new pair of sneakers, we'll give you $35. If they're $40, you got to pay the other $5 on your own. Now, it seems funny or mean or odd or whatever, but it taught lessons.
Sure.
And I have to tell you, I love what you do with Parker. We did that every Saturday. We would go to breakfast, and each Saturday, one of the kids got to pick where we went. And so when I see that, it tickles my heart.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So if there's a couple who is looking at starting a business, and what's some advice? Because you guys have been doing this for many, many years. What's some advice that you would give a couple who, whether they're independent businesses or working together on a business, that you would say, here's some things that you should set in place by launching into this?
Pray diligently. I know that we used to try to make our own way until we found that, somebody can take better care of us than we can, and helped us in the directions that. So we pray about anything that we're doing now.
But if someone is really feeling that they're led to have their own business, I think the first thing I would tell them is to find out what God's plan for you is. It may not be the first one that you do, but I would go to work for somebody else in that field. So if you wanted to be a real estate broker, go to work for somebody and figure out whether that's God's calling on your life, and if you like it. If it is, you can always go into business for your own. So it's kind of a trial and error situation. We both went through a number of things before we figured out what we thought was going to work for us. And I think sometimes today we still wonder if it's what we're supposed to do. But I think we both have come to the conclusion that it must have been what God wants us to do, because, and I don't look at it in terms of the, let's just call it the monetary success, but I look at it in terms of the reality of what's happened. And, you know, Bobbie sits and says, well, what have I really done? Well, she's given thousands of people starts or finishes with what their work might be. I remember about a guy that came in, he was like a mountain man, just hair and beard, you know, and she got him to work on a temporary position. Ended up one day, he walked in with a letter, all clean shaven, looking great, and the letter was saying, you know, you guys trusted me, and you gave me a chance
That's awesome.
to be able to do something. You know, and on my side, there's, you know, not thousands, but there's hundreds of people that I've been able to help them in their financial walk in life. And our kids have embraced that. I know Jamie does. Derek has the same values. You know, Jason does. Now, Jason took a step farther than I did. When he brings on a new client, one of the criteria is that they have to be tithing minded. I could never get myself to that point. But there's so many Christian principles that can be brought in to have people have a full life in what God has called them to do. And
Well, I'll tell you what, this is incredible.
Can I
Go
just
ahead.
tell you something, full disclosure? We couldn't have done it. We have amazing staff. They are really who made us what we are. Even people like Bonnie Williams and Bobby Dixon, fine Christian people. In fact, the original four that worked with me were Bobby, Bonnie, and Brenda. So we were the killer bees, and we all were Christian people, 3 children, and you know, like, we couldn't have been any more vanilla than anything. But I always said that none of us were MIT grads, but I'll tell you what, you put the 4 of us together, and then including up until now, the people that we have made us what we are.
And even things that seem small, but how major they are. I mean, I think Bonnie Williams was put with us for a reason. Bonnie Williams, I look at as very strong in the faith, very, very knowledgeable in the faith. And it was great to sit there in meetings and go, Bonnie, what's the Bible say? Okay, so I think she was put there. Now, a little unknown story is Bonnie started working for me.
I didn't know that.
On the Friday, I fired her. And on Monday, Bobbie hired her. And that was absolutely the best thing. She would not have flourished in my business as much as she has with hers.
But you didn't fire her for...
Well, I mean, it's just like, okay, you know,
said.
we're done today. Start someplace
I
else.
like the idea that you fired her. I'm going to use that somewhere. Well, listen, I've watched you two for years, and not only are you solid men and women of integrity in business, but you're also very connected to our community. And I just want to tell you, I'm so appreciative of people that don't just isolate themselves in their business, but they also take their experience into help. And even though it might be mentoring, we would call it ministering to other entrepreneurs, other people in our community, even that have nothing to do with your business. And I'm so grateful for what you guys both have done in that realm. And I actually see it in your kids as well, how they continue that legacy. So thank you for coming today. I know this was a long discussion, but I greatly appreciate your time and everything you shared today.
We've certainly
welcome.
been blessed, that's for sure.
Indeed.
This segment is brought to you by Harry's Construction, whose motto is, "If you can dream it, we can create it." They are the kitchen and bath design experts, so call Harry's Construction for all your remodeling needs.
Downtown Altoona has seen a revitalization in the past few years. Today, we will hear from Chris and Jennifer Cook about the role they are playing in seeing the area come alive again.
I want to thank the both of you for joining me today. And we're going to talk some things about Altoona, revitalizing Altoona, downtown specifically. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about yourselves and what brought you to this area and your interest in Altoona.
Yeah. So he brought me here. I'm a transplant. He's the original, what was it, Camelot, that I used to tease you and say that Altoona was like Camelot. And because the way he described it to me when we first met, I'm from Butler County area. It was like this kingdom, and I couldn't wait to come see it. And it was funny because our first couple dates we had, I heard about how Sheets is from here, Slinky's from here, Del Grosso's is from here. Like he had a big long list, and I didn't really realize how significant that was until I really started to process and move here. Where I came from, sure, we have the Jeep. We're known for the Jeep in Butler. But it is really something to be proud of. Yeah. Everything that is here in Altoona. So, but he's the grassroots guy.
Sure.
I mean, I've been here for almost all of my life. We moved here when I was 5, but my family is from here. My great-grandparents moved here from Italy and pretty much had their children here, and then my mom was born here. So pretty much my roots are pretty deep here for the last 150 years in Altoona.
So recently we've seen downtown Altoona, but Altoona as a whole, but downtown, some new things going on, revitalization. I know Penn State Altoona is doing more downtown, but I've heard in the last year or two a variety of things going on, and it seems like your name is attached to many of the things that we're hearing. So what's been your heart behind some of the things that you're wanting to see occur in this city?
Well, we kind of saw a need. We saw a lot of brokenness. We saw a lot of abandoned buildings. We saw a need to revitalize. And there's been amazing efforts by other groups of people that have got it so far. But then there were still certain buildings that were not where they should be. Specifically, the Columns was one that it was such a beautiful building when it was built, and it was just left into disrepair. So that was really our first one that we got a hold of. But honestly, previous to that, we restored the Center City Church as well. My company came in and did that. We weren't the owners, but that was kind of like a catalyst of hey, if we can do this with the church, let's see what the next step is and what else can we have influence on. So that was kind of a bit of the motivation to continue that.
Okay.
And lots of prayer.
Lots of prayer.
Lots of prayer and lots of, we started to have opportunities come our way. We didn't really seek out a lot of what we're doing. We had a lot of people come to Chris and say, hey, what do you think about taking this project on? Hey, what do you think about this building? What do you think about that? I think that's important to say because we weren't actively, like sharks downtown looking to buy up the land, but people were coming to us, and so we had to take a couple steps back and say, is this the lane we should be in? Is this where we should be? And so prayer, we even went and talked to our pastors and said, what do you think? Do you this is such a big project? So a couple of them are the biggest projects we've ever stepped into. I'm like, what do you think we should? And I'll never forget our pastor, Jim Comartin, looked at us and he's like, well, why not? And we're like, okay, so it was kind of one of those moments well, okay, well, why not?
Wow.
Yeah.
So in these efforts, let's talk a little about, you said this started with your business was restoring Center City. What is the business that you're referring to?
So Cook's Painting and Renovation is a business I established 20 years ago this year. Previous to that, I had also worked in restoration. I'd worked for my family's business, which was Albert Michael's Gallery. So I worked with them for 7 or 8 years, and that's really where I learned my trade. And So I think in 2002, I decided to launch on my own, and we worked in quite a significant amount of buildings here in Blair County in the Altoona area.
The courthouse.
The Blair County Courthouse was one of our keystone projects we worked on, but I also worked on the restoration of the Mishler Theater. We worked a little bit on Baker Mansion. We worked a little at the Jaffa Mosque, and then a lot of private homes. So I was pretty well established doing that for about 15 years. And then we kind of said, okay, this is the next step. We're going to start kind of branching out and opening new businesses and different businesses. We have the skills to do it, so why not?
So that's where the C&J Rental Management came in. So we started to purchase real estate and apartments and houses, and then it kind of grew into purchasing banquet facilities and purchasing buildings to restore. So it just kind of started to flourish and grow.
And I mean, this area it's rich in history. Unfortunately, a lot of it has just been let go for decades. So I think it's incredible that some of the things that you're restoring, that you're bringing back to life, not just in a look and standpoint, but a functionality standpoint. So what are some of the different projects that you mentioned the columns, and I've been familiar with that. What are some of the other things that you guys have been working to revitalize, if you will?
Sure. So it's going to be our keystone project, will be the Penn Central project. And that is attached to the columns, and we have the opportunity to really create housing for the people of the community that does not exist. So we are going to be developing and putting in 33 higher end market rate apartments, but it also is going to give us an opportunity to move our business right downtown. We're going to move our rental business below on the first floor. We are also going to put our cabinet business down there, and then we are going to do 2 small build-to-suit, a restaurant and then hopefully a boutique or something similar to that on the first floor that we don't plan on running. We're hoping that we can find tenants for that, but we really wanted to have a presence there, and combining that project with the columns, it's just going to be a really great opportunity. We'll be able to show the columns, at the same time meet with customers and sell kitchens, so it's a real good opportunity to kind of really just be present there, and we just want to change that entire culture of that whole corner. Right now it is not the best culture.
Sure.
But we are really hoping and praying that, that's transformed. And our first step in that is we're going to move our offices and our showroom there first. That way that culture can change. So by the time the apartments are ready, we're going to have a really nice environment that people want to come live at and, share their life there. So
it sounds like, I think that you're a dreamer. You're an innovative thinker. Let me ask you, when he comes to you with another idea, what's it like to say, okay, I support this, and some of these things you're not being hired to do these things, that someone's paying for you to do these are ventures that you're going into because you feel led to do it, and Lord willing that there will be a financial benefit to it, but that's not a guarantee. So whenever he's dreaming and thinking about, I'm sure he comes home, hey, I saw this building, or I'm thinking about buying this. What's it like in this process for you?
So a lot of people think we're crazy. I'll just say that. But what I will say is that God has put a gift inside of this man, and he is a dreamer. He is a developer. He forges ahead, and he is fearless. And so the gift that God has given me is that I know that he follows the Lord, and he prays about things, and he listens for his voice, and he knows when to move and when not to move. So when he comes home and brings me all of these ideas, some of them are like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, and others are like, what? Like, it looks like the apocalypse happened inside of the Penn Central, like that people just disappeared and it sat forever, and it's chaotic. But I have that sound base of faith, knowing that I trust him. And there have been things that have come across our path that he's been like, I think that's out of our lane. I don't think we should move that direction. There have been things that he's brought to me that has scared me a little bit, and I've thought, oh boy, I don't know. And so then there's prayer, and there's steps we go through together as a couple. We pray about it. We take it to leaders and people that we trust, that we know will speak godly wisdom into us and kind of pray over it with us. So we're not just out there running like, you know, chickens with our head cut off. We're like really following a process. So the gift that he gives me is that I have that sound capability of being still and knowing that he's seeking the creator and the author. And so that I know that we're not just running aimlessly at things. And the fun part of it is our children get involved too. We have an 18-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And so everything that we do, they're right there with us. We take them down to the building, if whether it's the Discovery Center or the columns or the Triangle building, and we walk through it. We pray together as a family through the building, because we believe that we need to set that foundation and pray over what is coming and what's to come, and the people that are going to come. So that is, I know that we've talked about this before, and I've heard him say, talking with people, that this is the first time he's been able to just really launch and go. And so that's a huge compliment to me, because I know that I'm being that wife that's supporting him and encouraging him.
What would you say has been the most challenging or the most difficult piece of this type of innovative thinking? Because it is different. A lot of times people go into, logically, they look at all the numbers, okay, this makes sense, we're going to dive into this. But I don't believe you guys operate that way. You're led by the Spirit more than logic.
Yeah, not, like she said, I'm not really afraid of it. I just, I have faith that it's going to happen. And we're looking to invest about $10 million in these 3 projects, which is, that's a lot of money.
And that's Penn Central, the McQuarrie building,
and the columns.
Yeah, so McQuarrie's is the most recent that we can talk about that if you want. But yeah, those 3 are the big key things downtown. And so for us, it's like so fantastic, because you know we mourn the loss of the Logan House that used to sit right across the road from the columns where the post office sits now. It was a beautiful, beautiful hotel and building, and it was torn down. And I would love to see that still sitting here today. So for our children, it's wonderful to know that they'll still see the columns, they'll still see Penn Central, the McQuarrie building will still be there, even though how many gallons of water are in the basement?
250,000 gallons of water. There's none in there now. It's empty.
Yeah, we're getting there. I would say, to answer your question, from my perspective, the hardest thing is sometimes it's finding the people to come in and work. But again, if we know that where God guides, he provides. So if we're going to step into this because we know it's where we're meant to be, then we're just going to keep believing that the right people. And I have to tell you, like, we have some pretty dynamic people that work for us.
That's awesome.
Like beyond dynamic. I mean, they're just top notch.
That's awesome.
And that's how we get it done.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So I am so appreciative of just the heart behind this. We at Joy in the City, we try to highlight people and organizations impacting our city, because we just love what God has done and is doing in our community. And what you guys have been doing recently, especially, it just piqued my interest. I thought, I got to get these guys on the show to talk about some of this stuff. So I'm grateful, and we'll just pray continued blessings and favor, because you guys are just beginning. I know this is just the beginning of some amazing things you guys are going to do for our community, and just very grateful for both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
We appreciate it.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you for watching Joy in the City, True Stories. Let me encourage you to watch other episodes of people and organizations having an impact on our community on ABC 23 at 5:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. every Sunday. Until then, be encouraged, because God is moving in our city.